Deltora Shadowlands, The Cavern of Fear. Chapter 10, Pursuit. Marilyn shivered and wrapped her cloak more closely around her. It was not yet dawn, but Leaf knew that she was shuddering not with cold, but with anxiety she was trying desperately to disguise. "Do not fear, Marilyn," he said gently. "You need do nothing but wait. Doom is staying here to prepare for a journey. He will watch over you, and Bara and I will soon return." He hoped that she would not ask him where he was going. Even in Torah, she might have heard the evil stories of the Osmine Hills. He smothered a sigh of relief as she nodded silently. "I had not planned to leave you so soon," Leaf went on carefully, "but I do not think that Jasmine will return for anyone but me, for I am the one who offended her." "I do understand, Leaf," Marilyn said in a low voice, "and you must not think I am a coward who will always panic as soon as you leave her sight." Torn between fury at Jasmine's stubbornness and a terrible fear for her safety, Leaf was impatient to be gone, but there was one thing left to ask. "Very few people know that we returned the Doom last night, Marilyn," he said. "Most people think we are still in Torah. It is safest if they continue in this belief for now. Will you remain out of sight while I'm gone? Mother will see to your meals." Marilyn raised her eyes to meet his anxious gaze. "Do not worry about me, Leaf," she said quietly. "I will occupy myself in the library." Leaf smiled, hiding his doubts. He had not remembered the library, but he could not bring himself to forbid it to Marilyn. As he left her, he told himself that all would be well. The guards would not allow Marilyn to stray in the forbidden hallway, and Joseph could surely be trusted to keep her presence secret. But what of Ranesh? Doubts stirred again, but Leaf forced them out of his mind and hurried down the stairs. He was approaching the kitchen, where he had arranged to meet Barda, when he heard a muffled scream. He quickened his pace, and as he threw open the door, a startling sight met his eyes. Barda had Jinx by the collar and was shaking him. Jinx, wearing a red nightshirt, his mouth smeared with jam, was howling, trying to kick the big man's legs. "You knew they had gone, you miserable worm," Barda was thundering, "yet you said nothing." "Am I Glock's keeper?" screeched Jinx. "He is old enough and ugly enough to look after himself. And as for that green-eyed minx he went with—" His voice broke off in a high-pitched squeal as Barda jerked him upwards, nearly strangling him. "Barda, put him down," Leaf begged. "He will wake the whole palace." Barda swung around, hauling Jinx with him. Jinx's eyes widened. "I did not know you were home, your majesty," he spluttered. "Call off your bear, I beg you. He has gone wild." "I can go wilder yet, Jinx," growled Barda. "Do not tempt me. Would you care to explain to your majesty why you were stealing food while the rest of us tighten our belts and eat only our fair share?" "I am but in delicate health," Jinx whimpered. "I need frequent, small, tasty morsels to keep body and soul together." "Indeed," said Leaf coldly. "I found him guzzling jam," said Barda, looking at Jinx with contempt. To get himself out of trouble, he accused Glock and Jasmine of being traitors. "It was very wrong of them to set out for the Shadowlands when your majesty has forbidden it," whined Jinx to Leaf. "Why, torn as I was between loyalty to them and loyalty to your majesty, it is no wonder that I became dizzy and needed a taste of sweetness." Barda snorted. Leaf moved closer to Jinx. "Glock and Jasmine are free to go where they wish," he said. "We are simply concerned for their safety. Do you know the way they have taken?" "They did not take the trouble to inform me," Jinx snapped, forgetting that he was supposed to be ill. His face creased into a furious scowl. "That animal Glock cares nothing for anyone else's comfort. My fighting spider lost to his in a lost contest and is mad for revenge. She kept me awake all night, beating at her cage. That's why I needed. Jinx, Leaf began in exasperation, but Barda's voice, tight with excitement, drowned him out. Glock took his spider with him then? He snapped. Yes, said Jinx sullenly. And what if he's away for weeks, or never returns at all? What am I? He squeaked as Barda began to haul him towards the door. Where are we going? He cried in panic. Not the dungeons, surely. It was just a few spoonfuls of jam. Your Majesty, stop him. Have mercy. Be silent, growled Barda. I am not taking you to the dungeons, you fool. You're going to dress and put your spider on its chain. Then you are coming with us. The journey to the Osmine Hills was the strangest Leaf had ever made. Barda held the whining Jinx on the saddle in front of him. Jinx held the end of a long, fine chain, and on the other end of the chain, scurrying in front of the horses, was a huge, spotted brown spider called Fury. Fighting spiders cannot stand defeat, Barda explained to Leaf as they rode. A losing spider will not rest until it has tracked the victor and forced it to fight again. Fury will follow Glock's spider's scent to the end of the earth, given the chance. She's our best hope of finding Glock and Jasmine quickly. It was soon clear that Leaf had been right in believing that Jasmine was aiming for the Osmine Hills. Without hesitation, Fury was leading them towards those ragged peaks regarded by dread by all in Dell. She moved so fast that the horses, picking their way over the rough ground, could hardly keep up with her. When she was forced to stop, she fought furiously to continue. At night, she beat ceaselessly against the sides of the cage in which Jinx kept while he slept. Not that Jinx or either of his companions could sleep. It was truly astonishing that a single spider, however large, could make such a din. The second day brought them to the first low, rocky ridges of the Osmine Hills. The way was even more difficult for the horses now, and Fury strained on her chain as the pace of her followers slowed. We might do better on foot, said Barda, as his horse stumbled for the third time in an hour. No, Jinx squealed. He squirmed in the saddle, his face a picture of fear. This is Grana's country. Have you not heard the stories? Of course, Barda said grimly, but so has everyone else. That's why there are no trails through this wilderness. On foot, we can at least follow Fury more safely. Jinx opened his mouth to argue, but his words were never spoken, for abruptly, a grey shape streaked from the bushes in front of them, sharp, yellow teeth snapped, and the horses reared, shrieking with pain and fright, tumbling their startled riders to the ground. As Leaf slowly came to his senses, he became aware that he was sitting on the ground, tied to a tree at the edge of a clearing. Something was panting close to his face. Its hot breath was foul. Leaf opened his eyes and saw grinning jaws, grey, matted fur, a wet, snuffling black nose. With a sinking heart, he realized that this must be a Granos. And there were more of them, several more, but the sound of other mutterings and gigglings in the background. The creature which had filled his vision moved back and squatted on the ground. Now Leaf could see its companions, 4 of them. All had the same evil grins on their faces. Every now and then, one of them would snap its yellow teeth unpleasantly. Leaf struggled to free himself, but at once realized that it was impossible. His ankles were tied to pegs that had been driven into the ground. His wrists were lashed to heavy logs of wood that lay on either side of him. His sword was still at his belt, but he could not reach it. Turning his head, he saw that Barda and Jinx were tied exactly as he was. Barda was still shouting furiously. Jinx's jaw was gaping, his eyes mad with fear. the remains of Fury's chains dangling from his wrist. Fury's chain must have broken when Jinx fell, thought Leaf. She will catch up to Jasmine and Glock without us. Perhaps she already has. Again, he vainly struggled against his bonds. They were only vines, but were as strong as the heaviest rope. "Free us, Granus, or it will be the worst for you," roared Barda. Their captors laughed uproariously. "It will be the worst for you," mimicked one. "Oh, I am so afraid." "This is Leaf, king of Deltora," Barda growled, jerking his head at Leaf. "You dare not harm him." "We care nothing for kings," sneered the first Granus, who seemed to be the leader. "The dragons have gone. These are our hills now." It grinned at Leaf and bowed mockingly. "But if you are a king, you can be the one to play the 20 questions game with us. We have never matched wits with a king before." Its shaggy companions grinned, snuffled, and snapped their jaws. A chill ran down Leaf's spine. The first Granus moved closer, rubbing its hands together. Tufts of grey fur covered the back of the hands. The fingers were thin as wires, taped by nails that were long, yellow, and rimmed with grime. Leaf stared in fascinated horror. His own fingers tingled at the thought of those hands grasping his, the sharp teeth moving closer. "Rules are simple, king," said the Granus, grinning horribly. "We ask question, you answer. If answer is wrong, you pay the price. 1 finger from you, and 1 from each of your friends, yes?" Jinx began to wail piteously. Fighting for calm, Leaf concentrated on the birds chattering in the trees that surrounded the clearing. No doubt, they were osmine vine-weaver birds of which he had learned as a child. Their famous net-like nests strung many of the tea drops. He breathed deeply, feeling Barda's eyes upon him. He knew that Barda was hoping against hope that the gems of the belt of Deltora would help them now. The topaz that sharpened the mind, the amethyst that calmed, the diamond that gave strength. He swallowed. "What if I will not play?" he asked. The Granus shrugged. "If you do not answer in time, it takes to count 20, you lose, and you each give a finger. Then we ask another question, and so on. You see?" Leaf saw only too well. "And if I answer correctly?" he asked. "Then no finger is taken," said the Granus, "and we ask another question. At the end of 20 questions, you are all free to leave us." Its face split into another hideous grin. "If you can," it added, "for when the fingers are finished, we can begin on the toes." Jinx's wails grew louder. Deltora Shadowlands, The Cavern of Fear, Chapter 11, A Friend in Need. The head Granus placed a small wooden board on Leaf's lap. The board was very old and beautifully crafted. Many squares of wood, each one bearing a painted letter, had been arranged upon it in rows. "Where did you get this?" Leaf exclaimed. "We have had many visitors before you, King," the Granus giggled. "Now, your first question is, what are the only useful things about you? The answer is hidden on the board. It may run up, down, sideways, or all three. Go." The board that Leaf was handed had letters scrambled all over. The first row read OALJGETINB, and so on. At once, the other Granus began to clap and chant. 20, 19, 18. Leaf stared at the board. The letters seemed to swim before his eyes. He blinked, trying to clear his head, searching desperately for a starting point. Words seemed to jump out at him. Get, tea, bent, base, pan. But they led nowhere. Up, down, sideways, or all three. 14, 13, 12. The counting was growing louder. Leaf glanced desperately at Barda. Barda, squinting at the board, trying to make the letters out at a distance, shook his head. Beyond him, Jinx, his face fixed in concentration and shiny with sweat, was staring straight ahead. But then, Leaf saw that one of the acrobat's hands, narrowed to a claw, was moving, twisting rapidly. Jinx was trying one of his old tricks, and this time it was not for the entertainment of others, or for a bet, but to save his life. He was trying to slip out of his bonds while the Grannus were not watching him. Leaf looked quickly back at the board, his heart thumping. The Grannus leader pretended to smother a yawn, tapping its gaping mouth with its hand. The wicked teeth were razor sharp, sharp enough to shear through flesh and snap through bone. The only good things about you. An idea flashed into Leaf's mind. Feverishly, he searched the board. The countdown went on. 6, 5, 4. And there was the answer, coiled within the mass of letters, crooked as a snake. 10 fingers and 10 toes, Leaf shouted. The chanting stopped, dissolving into a chorus of disappointed groans. Leaf risked another glance at Jinx. The little man had managed to free his hand and was cautiously feeling for the dagger at his belt. "No doubt you think you are very clever, King," said the first Grannus sulkily. "We will see. Here is your second question. Listen carefully." It folded its hands over its belly and recited, "A king dined with his sister, his friend, and his friend's wife. All of them were greedy beasts who loved food more than life. At last 3 pies alone remained. There wasn't any knife. How did they all have equal shares and save themselves from strife?" The chorus of counting began again. Leaf tried to forget about Jinx and concentrate on the rhyme. 3 pies, no knife. Equal shares for 4 people. It sounded impossible, but he knew that such apparently impossible puzzles always contained a simple trick. The chanting of the Grannus pounded on. 12, 11, 10. "Leaf," Borda whispered urgently. "Perhaps one of the 4 was killed by the others. The verse says they loved food more than life." Leaf shook his head. "It says they all had equal shares," he whispered back. "All of them. The king, his sister, his friend, and..." A thought stirred in the back of his mind. 5, 4. Barda cursed under his breath. 3, 2. "The king's sister was married to his friend," Leaf cried. "That is how the pies were equally divided. There were only 3 people at dinner all the time." This time, the counting broke off in howls of frustration. The head Grannus growled as the others began shouting at him, criticizing his choice of questions. Leaf slumped back, pretending relief, and slid his half-closed eyes in the direction of Jinx's tree. The acrobat had gone. The vines with which he had been bound were lying loose on the ground. He must have been even now creeping through the bushes behind Leaf and Barda, dagger at the ready to cut their bonds. "Hurry, Jinx," thought Leaf. The Grannus was still arguing, paying no attention to the prisoners. Jinx would never have a better chance than this. Barda drew a sharp, hissing breath. His eyes were fixed on a rocky hill that could just be seen over the trees on the other side of the clearing. Leaf followed his gaze. A small figure was scrambling up the hill. Jinx. Far from remaining to save his companions, Jinx was running away as fast as he could. One of the Grannus suddenly screeched and pointed. "Prisoner escaped," it howled. Instantly, the whole group plunged out into the bushes, following the acrobat's scent. "Oh, I hope they catch him, that vile little worm," muttered Barda, struggling violently against the vines that bound him. "How could he leave us here?" A vine-weaver bird flew down from the tree above Barda. and perched on the log to which his right hand was tied. It put its head on one side and regarded him with a sharp black eye. It nodded as if satisfied. Then it hopped onto its wrist and began pecking at the knotted vine. "Leaf," Barda whispered in astonishment. "Look!" The knots were loosening. The bird's long, expert beak was doing what all Barda's strength could not. In moments, his right hand was free. The bird began working on the knots that bound him to the tree while he sliced through the other bonds with a sword. He scrambled stiffly to his feet and staggered over to cut Leaf loose. Then, with the vine weepers sweeping ahead of them, they both stumbled out of the clearing and into the undergrowth. The bird darted on, plainly expecting them to follow. Even when the ground began to climb steeply, it did not slow, whistling impatiently whenever they paused for breath. At last, they reached the top of the hill and slumped to the ground panting. The air was filled with bird calls, and when Leaf raised his head, he saw why. Not far below them was a thick mass of treetops, ringed by the peaks of other grey hills. Birds in their thousands were busily weaving their nets or feeding on the yellow berries that covered the trees. Leaf and Barda's guide darted around their heads, calling urgently. "It is foolish to think that the bird is leading us to Jasmine," Leaf told himself as they followed it down to ground level. "Jasmine is searching for a valley, not a high-ground forest." But hope still flickered as he followed Barda into the trees, his feet sinking deep into the thick carpet of rotting leaves that covered the forest floor. Then he saw, just ahead, dozens of birds swooping around a small bush which was thrashing violently from side to side for no apparent reason. The vine weaver sped towards this place, and there, her chain caught around the bush, was Fury. She was living up to her name, twisting and lunging, her huge fangs snapping. Her trailing chain had become tangled around the bush and was holding her fast. Leaf swallowed his disappointment. The vine weaver, it seemed, thought one good deserved another. It had freed them. Now it wanted them to remove this unwelcome visitor from its forest. In moments, Barda had untangled the chain. The instant Fury felt it loosening, she made a wild dash forward, almost jerking him off his feet. Leaf felt hope flare all over again. "She is still following a scent," he shouted over the exciting shrilling of the birds. "Glock's spider must have passed this way." With a call of thanks to their relieved vine-weaver guide, they plunged after Fury into the trees. As they moved deeper into the forest, it grew darker and more silent. The only living creature to be seen were fat, gold-color moths that blundered about in the dimness like stray scraps of sunlight. For a long time, Fury did not pause. Then, abruptly, she stopped. She rose up on her back legs, her fangs clicking together, her front legs frozen in the air. "What is she doing?" Leaf whispered. He and Barda moved cautiously forward. Several of the big yellow moths were fluttering close to the ground, just beyond where Fury was poised. "She must be hungry," said Barda. Fury lowered her front legs once more and began creeping towards the moths. She had almost reached them when Leaf noticed something odd. There were more moths than before, yet he had not seen any new ones fly down to join the crowd. Then he realized what was happening. The moths were fluttering around a hole in the ground, and more moths were rising out of the hole every moment. "They must lay their eggs down there," murmured Baba. "Oh my god, apologies, listeners," murmured Barda. He shouted in annoyance as Fury suddenly jumped forward and scuttled into the hole, disappearing deep inside. The moths scattered, bumbling out of the way. Barda tugged vainly at the spider's chain, cursing it and ordering it to come back. But Leaf's heart was thumping as he threw himself to the ground, scraped the disguising pile of leaves away from the sides of the hole and peered into its depths. When he looked up, his eyes were shining. Barda, he claimed. Barda, you are not going to believe this. And, without another word, he swung his legs into the hole and followed Fury.